Before we get into this video, I just want to say quickly, you know who you are. You owe me a slice of banana bread and a tap water. Hey guys, Tarke here, and today I'm going to be talking about the patch notes for 3.9 Metamorph. I've made some notes before we get into it. I just want to say these patch notes were fairly underwhelming. Not that I think Metamorph will be a bad league or a boring league. I'm very excited for Conquerors of the Atlas. I'm very excited for Metamorph. But as far as patch notes go, this has been some of the most boring patch notes we've had in a very long time. Also, one thing which I think a lot of people are potentially overlooking, there are a series of small changes which are happening to enemy defense and a series of nerfs, small nerfs, that I think will add up to Path of Exile being a much more challenging game, which is something I completely support. Now, one thing that really did frustrate me a little bit is from the developer manifesto that we had coming out the day before, we had a bunch of abilities named as these are going to be getting buffs. This is a buff. Nearly all of these abilities barely got changed, and I'll talk about all of them individually. But by presenting it the way they did, it got people excited for these abilities. So Ark's targeting range went from 25 to 35. Ark's targeting range originally was 50. It will chain slightly further off screen, but it still won't be as good as it used to be. I would still rather play Lightning Trap than Arc Traps. And I think Icicle Mines will off-screen harder than Arc Mines, but you can play that if you want to. Moulton Strike. Moulton Strike really annoys me. So Moulton Strike got a amazing buff of 9% increased damage. And they've nerfed Point Blank. So it's weaker than it was before. And yet they made a point of mentioning it by name. It's just very bizarre to me. Like, why would you do that? Shattering Steel and Lancing Steel. Me and Octavian had a conversation on Discord after the manifesto for the patch notes. And we're like, oh god, maybe these abilities will be sleeper OP. And it's like, they've teeny-weeny little changes. They'll still be good abilities, but it's just like, boring. Venom Gaia, again, very small change. Soul Rend is really the winner from all of this. So, just to explain how Soul Rend works, there's some confusion. So, this is you casting Soul Rend. Soul Rend has, like, the maximum travel distance. And Soul Rend applies its damage over time in an area. And the damage over time applies a debuff on the enemy. So if the enemy is... Hang on, let's just say... So let's say that's the enemy. Make a new Soul Rend. So Soul Rend travels along this line. So when it first touches the enemy here, it applies its debuff. And it used to have a 0.4 second duration, now it's into 0.6 second duration. So it applies the debuff, it travels, it travels, it travels, it travels, the debuff falls off, it refreshes the debuff, travels, constantly refreshing the debuff. By increasing the duration, it means you need to cast it less often. This will be very noticeable in single target, because if single target, just like spamming Soul Rend to constantly reapply. And also it means that if you've got low damage, or you've got low gear investment, you'll have a smoother time clearing packs because you'll be applying damage for longer. It doesn't mean that you're applying the same amount of damage over a longer period of time, still applying the same amount of damage each second. It just lasts more, you'll deal more damage. When Soul Rend first came out, it had a larger area, and I was hoping they were going to buff the area. When they nerf the area, they nerf the duration, because again, with the old Soul Rend, it had a larger area, and it would be constantly applying its debuff to 0.4 seconds, but because it had a longer area, it would refresh it more often, and it would hit more mobs, which meant it felt better for clearing. So even though they haven't buffed the area by buffing the duration, it will kind of feel the same as it did for single target when it first came out, maybe slightly better, but it will feel slightly worse for map clear. That being said, we have a new support gem called Greater Volley. I think Greater Volley would probably be better than Greater Multiple Projectiles. And we also have Awakened Greater Multiple Projectiles. So map clear Soul Rend could be pretty good with the new Awakened support gems. And I think Soul Rend will be a perfectly fine build. Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be fine. The Icicle Mine change, a lot of people have been like freaking out about the Icicle Mine change. Icicle Mines will still be good. This is basically a buff to Deadeye Icicle Mines. A lot of people were already playing Deadeye Icicle Mines because of chaining. Deadeye has a bunch of projectile speed in it. You want projectile speed to scale the off-screening of Icicle Mines. And when it chains, it becomes a new projectile. So yeah, go chain with your Icicle Mines now. Next up in the notes, they've added new damage over time multipliers, which can roll on weapons and quivers as a suffix, and also arrows can be rolled as a suffix. This is really nice for any chaos build. So for example, let's say you're playing Soul Rend, Essence Drain, Bane, and used a caster bow. Having this new damage over time on weapons and quivers, huge. Really, really nice. Having the additional arrow is obviously very big for damage over time arrow builds, like Caustic Arrow, Burning Arrow, Explosive Arrow, all that other stuff. I would probably recommend Burning Arrow over Explosive Arrow. Explosive Arrow looks fine. Sorry. They've just... Some people are freaking out because they removed the weapon scaling. It still has, like, infinitely scaling fuses. And you're getting crazy big ignites. And you get more ignites per arrow. So the main real goal is just to have as many arrows as possible in the enemy. So you're just going to want, like, 100 arrows in an enemy. Get one really big ignite. But saying all of that, Val Burning Arrow looks really spicy. Really, really spicy. So it does 100% more damage with Ignite from level 1 up to 188. And the way that Burning Arrow works now is you apply the first arrow, applies an Ignite, but then it's like stacks up to 5 times. Val Burning Arrow stores multiple charges. So you just like unleash all your Val Burning Arrows into the boss, and you just get like a really fucking big ignite. Val Burning Arrow will be a really tasty single target, and you're probably even gonna want to use Val Burning Arrow in your Explosive Arrow builds, maybe. Like because you got 2 6 links if you're not using a combs. Maybe you like open with unleashing your Val Burning Arrows, and then you like stack up your Explosive Arrows. One thing you could also do, if you wanted to go like meme single target, is actually get increased skill effect duration, so you can stack more explosive arrows into bosses. Having more skill effect duration will feel bad for map clear, but I don't know, it's kind of interesting. I'm sure there'll be some decent explosive arrow builds. I'd probably go mine explosive arrow just to really go crazy on getting as many arrows as possible. Ballistas are pretty underwhelming, so I was kind of thinking about maybe doing like ballista explosive arrow. Siege Ballista just seems kind of trash to me. So it has a 50% attack speed penalty, and it hasn't received any defensive buffs. You can have 3, so you get 2 additional from the gem, and they've added a pretty nice cluster here, and a pretty nice cluster here, which give additional, which is good. They're a bit far apart, though. Like, it's going to be a bit awkward traveling this way. So, yeah. Maybe you could have something where you travel this way and then you shove like a Lion Eyes here and you convert a bunch of these melee nodes. So it doesn't feel that bad that you're traveling this outside path. But, yeah, it's a little bit awkward. It's a little bit awkward, to be honest, getting this cluster here. You could just anoint it with an oil as well, eventually, which is fine. But some of these other clusters are pretty decent as well. Like, each totem applies increased damage to enemies near it. Pretty good. Having all the attack speed stuff is pretty good. And also these nodes defensively are pretty important. And I feel like you're going to want some defensive totem nodes because the ballistas just don't have any real defense. The problem with a lot of totem builds is they're very good league starters. They do a lot of damage and they feel really good for like for leveling and early mapping. When you get to the really scary endgame bosses and Conquerors of Atlas and Metamorphs around scary bosses, they just die. So it's like, if your totem's just dying, sure, you can deploy the ballistas very quickly, but I don't know. I feel like you're going to want to definitely invest into totem defense, so I'm curious to see how these things are going to look. Since we are looking at the skill tree, We have these new clusters, which is minus to total physical damage reduction against your hits. These are pretty decent. These are solid. They're on already pretty good pre-existing clusters. I could also definitely see people doing like Lion Eyes memes where they convert a bunch of these to pick up all of these good nodes, like shove one here, maybe grab this cluster and this cluster. I don't know. I like those. The new Ignite cluster here, the placement is a little bit awkward because of the path that it's on. I kind of wish that it connected this way, but whatever. If it connected this, it'd probably be too broken because this is a very strong cluster already. Damage with fire damage with attack skills, fire damage over time multiplier, damage with attack skills, damage and multiplier, ignite to inflict deal damage faster, really nice, and then damage with attack skills, and then this has ignite duration, which is really good. So you're gonna want to take this full 4 points. That's really good. The new lightning cluster they added here, horrible placement in my opinion, but yeah, I don't know. I really like this cluster. I imagine if you were like, how will did I not save the trees? Oh, I didn't save the tree as well. If you were to ask me to try and like throw together a very rough like burning arrow explosive arrow tree, it'd probably look something kind of like this. Throw on any ascendancy. You've got lots of different options in which way you want to go with it. You can go champion, you can go ranger ascendancies, you can go chieftain, you can go juggernaut, you can go elementalist. They're all pretty valid. But basically take all the really nice duration clusters, get some life nodes, and then scoot along and just like grab all the nodes. For burning arrow, like straight burning arrow builds, you can't take EE if you deal any physical damage. You could do like Tempest, Stormfire, EE. That's the kind of way you could go about it. And then you want to come across the top, grab more life. These trees have a lot of travel, so there's going to have to be some like thought process on what you cut, but I'm just going to throw everything in that you would want. And okay, that would be everything that you want. So yeah, obviously that is a lot of points. You need to work it out. You probably can't afford to take this shit. If you go ranger base, that's level 95 tree. A 95 tree is pretty realistic, and it's got a bunch of jewels in it. It's got all the ignite stuff going on. It's got the minion stuff if you want to go for the minion stuff. If you were to go explosive arrow, you're going to want to take some AoE. AoE is still decent for prolif builds because it scales the prolif. And if you were to go, for example, champion instead of ranger, you could drop all of those nodes and just kind of like do that, you know. But you're still going to want this. It's really awkward this cluster is where it is because it's so powerful and you're not going to be able to anoint it early. So, whoops. You would do something kind of like that. And then that's like a level 90 tree, which is pretty good. Has a bunch of jewels. Has all the good damage over time stuff. You also have this cluster, which is pretty good, because this has AoE and damage over time stuff in here. Heavy draw and deadly draw are both very powerful. So you could maybe do something kind of like that. There's a few ways of rooting it. But yeah, your trees will look sort of something like that. They're a bit awkward, though, because you want these nodes. And then you want these nodes and these nodes. But yeah, not at all optimized. That's roughly kind of how I would build those builds. Getting back into the patch note side of things, nothing really stands out. As I said, just there are some random changes. The LMP buff is pretty nice. It's pretty good. There's just a bunch of miscellaneous things in here. Some things got hit kind of hard. But to be honest, if you were to never read a set of patch notes, this would be the patch notes not to read. Because it's just kind of boring. I don't know. Just... It didn't get me excited. It didn't really get me salivating. For some build recommendations, people playing 3.9, I could highly recommend Vortex Cold Snap. We're going to be very solid. Bane, Essence Drain, Soul Rend, Ignite Fireball, Burning Arrow. I think Explosive Arrow will be fine. I think Burning Arrow might just be a bit better though. definitely be a lot smoother to level with. Toxic Rain, either like normal Toxic Rain or Toxic Rain Totems or Toxic Rain Mines. Octavian's going to be playing Toxic Rain Mines. It looks really solid. Corsicar is looking very solid. Lightning Trap looks great. Whatever Summoner Uber Elite plays. Pyroclasm Mines. Icicle Mines if you're going Deadeye. Magma Orb is a new visual. So Magma Orb has always been a very powerful ability that people don't like using because of the visual and the sound effects. So maybe Magma Orb might actually be pleasant to play with. So, yes, anyway, I'm Tarke. I hope you all have a wonderful day. These are some builds I'd recommend. And those are some pretty underwhelming patch notes. Enemies are going to be a lot harder, which I like. The game's going to feel a lot more challenging, which I like. Early progression into the Atlas, I imagine, is going to feel kind of rough with low gear investment. If the game feels really tricky for you at the start, don't worry about it. Play a spellcaster, because spellcasters don't need gear, and you'll be fine. And if you're playing an attack build off the bat, then just, be patient with it. Yes. I'm Tarke. Have a great day. Buy me banana bread, by the way.